Broadcasting worldwide from the beautiful hill country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com. Well, a very pleasant good morning to you. This is Patrick Timpone. You've got OneRadioNetwork.com. We're live every morning, hopefully, with the Mercury's in retrograde. So we're still working in our Mercury in retrograde karma out, but I think we're going to do good. We're going to have fun this morning. Looking forward to it. Been a fan of Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter, the Golden Jackass thing. He's in Central America. He studies geopolitics and money, has currencies, central banks, the banks. We learn a lot about it with Andrew Goss on Wednesday, but he has a different perspective. He has different sources than Andrew, and I think you're going to have fun if you'd like to join the show. 888-663-6386. 888-663-6386. Email Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. We have to apologize for kind of a lost weekend on our website. We were doing site repairs all weekend long, looking for some viruses. I'll tell you, it's easier to find viruses in the body with colloidal silver and olive leaf extract and oregano oil than it is on computers, but we're back up and things are good, and so I appreciate your patience. Get the orders in for sulfur. We'll be telling you about that this morning. We haven't been able to take orders or any kind of sales all weekend long. I'll tell you about this week's show. Andrew Goss with the Real World of Money, currency historian. He's here every Wednesday, and he'll be here on Wednesday. Dr. Richard Massey, he will be here on Thursday. Indigo Children, you've heard about that. That will be here. They'll be tomorrow. And Stephen Buhner, he's probably one of the top herbalists in the world, will be here tomorrow. So that's this week's schedule. Jim Willie comes from the United States industry with three main fields of statistics covered. He earned his PhD in statistics at Carnegie Mellon University in 1980. Three fields are quality control and manufacturing, marketing research, computer technology, sales forecasting. 2004, the Golden Jackass has been running the Hat Trick Letter. Now, this is a newsletter that comes around once a month. It has two different reports, and I've been a member for some time. For a small amount of money, you'll get quite a interesting outlook on the geopolitical world of money, finance, and the current major forecasts include the rejection of the United States dollar as a global reserve and the installation of a Eurasian trade zone, the flipping of East Germany to the east, by Germany, Turkey, Saudi, and Japan, and the return of the gold standard. Wow. The return will come through the trade window, not the currency window. The acceleration of systemic breakdown events has come in earnest during January here, exactly as forecast. He does some pretty cool forecasting. I saw in I think it was December of 13, Jim Willie predicted that the Swiss central bank was going to release the currency, the peg on the euro, and go up 30%. And Jim Willie, you were right there. That was a year and a half ago. Well, over a year ago.
Well, I've been repeating the forecast because they were getting more and more extended. I heard actually a theory from my gang. I don't know what to call them, staff, virtual staff, colleagues, brain trust.
Your deep throats?
Well, there's one good, I call him the voice, but I have a couple of other sources. But we pieced it together, and we believe Germany worked with the Swiss to end their peg, save face, but at the same time disrupt the dollar. Unseat the dollar and start the dollar death process.
Really?
I think the Germans gave the Swiss a margin call on their short gold position. That's what I think happened.
Germany gave the Swiss a margin call on their short gold position. So explain to people what that is. So Swiss were short gold and
long the dollar.
And long dollar, okay? And Germany, and this was a deal they had with Germany, Jim?
No, it's not a deal they had with Germany, but Germany got tired of the whole thing.
How were they involved if the Swiss were just short gold? I don't understand that.
Well, the Germans are a very powerful nation. They're holding something like 4,000 tons of gold. A lot of attention has been given to the 330 tons, which is less than 10% that they have, held, closely, absconded, stolen, borrowed incorrectly by the New York Fed in London. But they have 4,000 tons. I think maybe some of the leasing that the Swiss were doing was of German gold. They're shorting gold. They did something kind of clever. Yeah. They've been going long the dollar using treasuries. Notice tremendous demand for treasuries, not just the Federal Reserve and its interest rate derivatives. There's more in there, but it's not from official capacity windows. It's not the Central Bank of Germany. It's not the Central Bank of France. It's not the Central Bank of England. There's a lot of hidden U.S. Treasury demand, and I think some of it's through the Swiss arbitrage. They were long the dollar and short gold. Well, the Swiss are unique. They have a lot of channel surfing. They know who's moving gold. They know who's leasing gold. They know who's receiving emergency supply of gold. They know what gold is coming to the Swiss refiners. They know the orders to China. They know who stole what gold, and they did most of the stealing themselves. So the Swiss realized, whoa, wait a minute, this is getting pretty dry in the gold leasing. We're at the end here, and I think at the same time the Germans said, we're going to pull the plug on this. And this is kind of a backdoor German move against the Euro Central Bank and the U.S. Fed. That's my theory.
I've always understood that the Germans were on a very short leash since the war, kind of like an outpost of the United States government or the people that run the United States government, Jim Willie. How is Germany able to get away with those kinds of things, if that's true, and perhaps that premise is not true?
Well, I think a misconception that's often made regarding Germany is that it is of one mind and it is from one camp. Germany's a very large, powerful country. To be sure, its political leaders are on a short leash. And I've come to learn that even leaders like Angela Merkel had to sign, as part of her inauguration, an oath of allegiance to the U.S. government.
Really?
And not, they were a defeated nation.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And Japan ditto. So
yes,
the political leaders are on a short leash, and their banking leaders have been on a short leash to London and Wall Street. But notice Deutsche Bank fell. That was a year and a half ago. That was 2 years ago. So you've got a break. Now, there's another camp. I referred to two camps. I didn't describe the second. Are listeners aware that between 3,000 and 5,000 German companies are doing business presently in Russia?
No, we are now.
Are listeners aware that most of the heavy rail facilities, the traffic and the grid from Russia has a destination endpoint in Germany? Okay. The industrial leaders, the corporate executives, the conglomerate boards of directors, they are outraged at what's going on. They do not want Russian sanctions. And they have basically done something that started somewhere around, it's very hard to say. It could have been as early as 2011 when the Germans requested a repatriation of their gold. But let's just focus on closer time frame. In the last year, especially since the Ukraine war, the Germans have decided we're done with the euro, we're done with the union, We're done with NATO. We're moving east.
Wow.
I've got this from 3 independent sources. One of them is The Voice. He's got extensive Asian clients. Let's just say clients. Another is London Paul, who's got Russian clients. And a third I'd rather not name. But they all say the same thing. The German industrial leaders have let it be known that their nation is not going to go down the sewer just so they can remain, tethered, linked on the U.S. leash. I don't want to get into a long Ukraine discussion, but I will share something that I learned just a few months ago. It was from one of my good sources, and he said, I have heard why the Germans requested their repatriation of gold, and we're only talking about 330 tons. Does anybody realize they have 4,000 or more tons? This is a small portion of the German gold. The U.S. and London did not abscond with all the German gold. They still have 90% of their gold. Okay, I heard that back in 2011, the Obama administration gave a State Department briefing to the German leaders and showed them their plan to cut the cord with Russia and to basically create scorched earth in Ukraine and sever the marriage before it ever happens between Russia and Europe. And the Germans said, "Are you out of your minds? We want our gold back, you idiots." So much more is going on than meets the eye, even though we see things like the Swiss broken peg. I thought that the peg was, very vulnerable 2 years ago. How can they sustain it? What are they going to do? Go to $1 trillion in holdings of euros? I heard they got up to $800 billion worth of euros. Okay, there's more to this Swiss story, a lot more. We're going to be getting drabs in time, but I heard 2 years ago, this is 2012 and 13, I heard that Langley bought lots and lots, let's say a dozen or two, maybe as many as 24 Swiss mansions, and filled them. I'm talking about their basements and their, 4-car garages and whatever. They filled them with shrink-wrapped Swiss franc bills in pallets. So Langley knew this was temporary. And, it begs the question, well, what was the source of the money for Langley? And by the way, Langley is not a hedge fund. Langley is the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, it begs the question, what was the money? Where did the money originate? And I don't know whether it was just basic savings from their narcotics business or whether it was, say, counterfeiting because they rival Iran and North Korea as the leaders in counterfeiting U.S. currency. That's correct. Langley, Iran, and North Korea are the biggest of the counterfeiters of U.S. currency. I ran a story back in 2007 that the Treasury Department of the United States government announced that one of their very, very highly valued plates for $100 bills was missing. It wasn't missing. It was just taken by Langley under some authority. And, get out of our way or we'll kill you, your wife, and your daughter.
It's 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Jim Willie, the Golden Jackass, a hat trick letter. That's what he writes, the hat trick letter, 20 minutes after the hour. We have questions for him coming in already. You have questions, 888-663-6386. Email patrick@oneradionetwork.com. So can we assume, if those of us who read your letter and just hearing what you've heard the first 20 minutes here, that there really is something going on huge in the monetary world, geopolitical world? Can we say unprecedented, or how would you say it? I mean, is something really up? I mean, are there big changes in the winds?
Yes. Take a look at history of money, and you see that fiat currencies in past centuries never made it more than 31 or 2 years. Well, Bretton Woods was broken as a gold standard in 71, and here we are, 43 plus years later. We set the record. Well, how'd we do it? How'd the U.S. extend the record for a toxic fiat paper currency and break the record? Well, easy. We kill people, we kill leaders, we trample on nations and steal central bank gold like we did in Libya, like we did in Ukraine. Listeners need to understand that one of the first acts and two first acts and deeds since the Ukraine coup d'etat took place was immediate. $70 billion of oligarch rival money were removed and put into Swiss banks. It'll never come back. And the second was the U.S. with hooded masks in the middle of the night with threats to the tower and elsewhere, took off with 33 tons of gold from Kiev's central bank. You know, the U.S. engages in a lot of intimidation. Iraq started trading oil in euros. They sold their oil. They received euros. Saddam boasted about it. Next thing you know, he didn't get disemboweled. He got attacked, right, invaded, and then hanged. Gaddafi wanted to do a gold-backed dinar, so he ended up in a culvert with kind of a disemboweled condition. The U.S. uses other, they're not legal, they're just sophisticated methods like the interest rate swap derivative. I came to learn only a year after it happened. I expected, what are my forecast errors? I got about an 80 or 90% correct forecast record, and compare that with Wall Street that has maybe a 20 or 30% forecast correct record. They don't care about being correct. They care about defending the fortress. But back in 2011, I came to learn that my forecast error of a rising treasury bond yield on long maturities was incorrect for a very good reason. Morgan Stanley, the official bitch of Wall Street to handle interest rate derivatives, put on $8.5 trillion worth of interest rate derivatives in just the second half of 2010. That's why Bill Gross of PIMCO was wrong also. He didn't expect that. He was expecting rising bond yields. He was short. It's a long story about Bill Gross. It's ancillary here. I don't want to get off track.
Yeah.
But the U.S. sets records because of war, crime, murder, market rigging, and other things. So it's coming to an end. And, we hear about this global currency reset.
Okay, before you say that, when you say it's coming to an end, this is what I'm curious about. If the people that own and control Dollar Inc. and run the U.S., and they're not going to run out of zeros, and the world reserve currency, Jim Willie, continues to go with a 95% market share, whatever they have. As long as people continue to use dollars, Jim, why would it have to come to an end? As long as people don't get it, the people that use the dollars, why would it have to hit a wall? I don't understand that.
I don't know. Maybe you've made an assumption that the dollar is continuing in widespread usage. I hope you're not making that.
Okay, so I guess I am. I mean,
so we go on the long list of those who are not using the dollar?
All right, go ahead.
Back in 2006, the Chinese set up a yuan swap facility with Brazil. And no one really cared.
Right.
Who cares about Brazil?
Small story.
Yeah, Brazil is just a small country with 190 million people, the heart of Latin America. Who cares about that? Okay, so that was followed by a long series of other yuan swap facilities set up in other countries. Just to name a few, France, England, Switzerland recently, Germany and Frankfurt, Australia, New Zealand, and recently in Canada. So all bilateral trade between those countries and China will not be done in the dollar.
They just won't. No more.
No more. Well, for years.
All right.
This is not new. This is
Okay.
not new. People who think that the dollar is central to global trade they have been missing out on one of the biggest trends. Every year, the percentage of global trade settled in dollars goes down, and it's approaching 50%. So recently you had an announcement by Russia. This was another of my correct forecasts. I said, well, Russia will depart from all trade settlement for their energy sales in dollars, and they'll go to, who knows, rubles or yuan, RMB. RMB stands for renminbi. It's a kind of a nickname for the Chinese yuan, RMB. I'm looking for an RMB account, and they're setting up an RMB hub. Now look at London and Frankfurt, Germany. They're competing now as RMB hubs for two functions: bond issuance sold in RMB, the Chinese currency, and major transactions, conversions of RMB currency also for trade. So the biggest trend that I identified was something that I forecasted in 2012 and 13, the rejection of the dollar and the dominant move away from the dollar in trade settlement.
So this is something that's, you're saying, Jim Willie, that's really significant. It's big. We don't hear about it even on the alternative media on the internet, unless you really dig. It's much more than this 95 or so on the U.S. dollar index is showing. It's much, in other words, it's much more significant in the loss of this dollar than we're seeing around the world in just any kind of media.
I disagree. I think for the last 3 years you've been seeing a ton of evidence that the dollar is not being used to trade much. And one of the major stories to start that trend was the yuan swap facility. You're getting to the point where almost all the Chinese trade is non-dollar. That's all over the alternative media. And now you're seeing the next big rise in the last year and a half of the BRICS nations and their alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and their alliance. The alliance has 140 nations signed up. Here's just a quick fact regarding the global currency reset. Back in December of 2013, we're talking about a year and 2 months ago, the United States was a signatory of the global currency reset. Think of it as a contract or a treaty or a pact or accord. I don't know what they call it. Probably not a treaty, an accord. The State Department didn't sign it, therefore it's not a treaty. And the U.S. violated pretty much every treaty that's ever signed in 300 years. The global currency reset was to, people think that it was to devalue currencies and to, bring on a birth process of the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnam dong. I mean, I laugh at stuff like this. The global currency reset was a misnomer, meaning it had a false name.
They usually do, right? Just the opposite of what they're going to do.
Yeah, kind of like financial regulatory bill.
Or the Bank Secrecy Act or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the global currency reset was designed at the same time to introduce the dinar and the dong and to reset the Indonesian rupiah. The global currency reset was to double the gold price in terms of the major currencies. So what kind of devaluation are we talking about?
So these currencies can move up or down a little bit to the dong or the dinar. They can move up and give them more numbers, digits, but in terms of gold, they're going to actually go down. Right.
They were going to double the gold price, so they call it a currency reset.
Right.
I mean, this is just absurd. They were going to double the gold price in terms of the 5 major currencies and triple the silver price, and that would bust the big banks and their Forex derivatives tied to precious metals. And then you have the major Western bank defaults, failures, the shutdown of the COMEX, and the United States signed it in December of 2013, but they changed their minds. and decided in February of last year, let's have a war in Ukraine instead.
Ah.
And they stole all the gold, 33 tons in Ukraine. And what does that buy? A month or two? I don't know. What did the $70 billion of stolen oligarch money that's sitting in the Swiss banks and never will come back to Kiev, what's that going to be used for? Could it possibly have been to source gold? And what was the Belgian bulge of $430 billion worth of treasury bonds? What was that all about, showing up as assets on the Belgian central bank?
Stealth QE is what it was about, wasn't it? In a way?
I think it was part that, but maybe mostly the BRICS nations sending their money, putting it into a holding tank in Belgium to source the BRICS gold central bank.
Wow. Okay, we got to take a quick little break here. It's got some fairly unique and, macro stuff here that you don't hear a lot of other places around the world, and that's Jim Willie with the Golden Jackass and the Hat Trick Letter, which he writes and I subscribe to once a month. And you can too by going to thegoldenjackass.com. It's 28 minutes before the hour. This is Patrick Timpone, OneRadioNetwork.com, back with Jim Willie and your questions. We'll take some emails here. Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com. Again, we apologize for being down all weekend. There were some major things going on with the website, and these things with the computers just kind of happen. And so it looks like things are back up and running, and Sharon's trying to get the front page back up and get the schedule up and those kinds of things. But if you've not enjoyed some of the sulfur that I took this morning that you can take and you can enjoy, there's a lady in, let's see, she is in Thailand. We ship all over the world. Just got an email from her today. She wants to get 3 9-pound, is that amazing? 3 9-pound orders of sulfur for her and her friends in Thailand. She listens to the show out there. And we're getting people from around the world who want to try this sulfur. It's just pure organic sulfur, unlike any MSM that you've ever tried. You can just click an order on the front page of One Radio Network. There are 3 prices, $79 for a 3-month supply for the United States, $94.50 Canada, and $99 worldwide. We give discounts for people like Annabelle that order more than 4 pounds. We can only ship 9 pounds in a box, but you can get 6 pounds, 8 pounds, whatever, and we'll give you discounts, generally about 10% or so. We'll work it out with you. Just email me and give me your address, and we'll give you the price on what you want. This is pure organic sulfur. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. And I've been knocking around the natural health world, as you may or may not know, for over 30 years. And this is probably one of the more fun stuff that I've ever tried, because you can really feel it, remembering more of your dreams, having more clarity, just more oxygen everywhere. And everything is happier when you have more oxygen. We know that, right? This is pure organic sulfur from OneRadioNetwork.com. Previously with cancer specialist Dr. Francisco Contreras on rebounding.
There's a study that was done in America with women that exercise 4 hours a week strenuously, and those that had 66 less incidence of cancer of the breast than the women that didn't do exercise. That's how impactful exercise can be.
We've been a big fan of rebounding, these little trampolines, for years.
Rebounding is one of the best, because not only is not as aerobic as many other exercises, but it also moves the lymph from within your body. And remember that lymph is the one that's bringing out all of the toxins. And if you don't get it up to your heart and then out through the urine, the toxins stay there. So rebounding is an excellent form of exercise that just about anybody can do. I mean, we have some 85-year-old people that rebound. It's very easy, even for elderly people, to get on the rebounder and just go up and down. It's an excellent exercise.
Certainly is. The Rebound Air Lifetime Warranty Rebounder, $319 delivered, Continental U.S. Click an order right now. OneRadioNetwork.com.
We are listener supported. One Radio Network. Talk to Patrick now. 888-663-6386 or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
Somewhere deep in the jungle of Central America, Jim Willie, the hat trick letter, thegoldenjackass.com. He has a PhD and he studies this stuff. This is what he does. He's got sources all over the world. Fascinating. It's 24 minutes before the hour. Jim Willie, here's an email from David in the UK listening this morning. Question: what is Jim's assessment of the possibility that the game is actually playing to plan in that problem, debt slavery, reaction, East-West or BRICS cabal, solution, new control paradigm is not driving the sheeple into just another control pen? How confident is he that the new kids on the block, especially China and Russia, are truly detached from the current masters from hell? Just asking.
That's a frequent question I ask The Voice. He gets a little bit impatient with me because every 2 or 3 months I trot out the same question. I started asking that in early 2013 when a lot of rumors were floating around that Putin is just another tool. And
right.
I find that this entire line of thought, theory, and justification is garbage. Garbage. Putin might be connected, but he booted out the Rothschilds, and he did so in 2013 or so. And the Ukraine war is the vengeance by the Rothschilds against Russia. The Rothschilds funded, by the way, the Bolsheviks in the revolution to try to keep the Russian nation in a sleep mode for a century. How'd that work out? So there's resentment in Russia against the Rothschilds. Putin booted them out from controlling their finances and made it impossible since 2005 for the Western bankers to access the vast, vast hoard of gold that they have. The Voice assures me that it's over 25,000 tons.
Russia?
Yes.
25,000? 25,000
tons minimum.
Wow.
China has almost that much, about 20,000 tons. We laugh at the stories that Russia's going to announce an increase from 1,045 tons of official gold to 3,000 because they don't want to talk about the 25,000 that are sitting under the Kremlin. They're prepared for this brick. So when you hear people talk about Putin is just another poodle,
right,
you're hearing some of the most ignorant opinions on the alternative media.
And how do you know that statement to be true?
Because I have numerous contacts. They all say the same thing, that Putin and the Kremlin, China and the White Dragons, they're all battling the London and the Swiss elite, castle dwellers. They're at war with the Rothschilds. There's a global war going on, the Eastern wealthy families versus the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. There's a war going on. They're not having a war in a staged fashion, in some moronic, simplistic, simpleton viewpoint.
So
Putin has angered the Rothschilds. And here's just it's not so much a statistic as a point of reality. There are a couple things to point out.
Okay.
Back in March of 2012, I heard from The Voice, well, he actually told me about 3 months later. He told me this in about May and June of 2012. He said, Jim, hear this very clearly. The older families of Asia, the East, are draining London of 1,000 tons of gold per month. And I said, that's a lot of gold. How long will that continue? And he said, for a while. All right, then about 8 months later, I asked him, sir, tell me, are they still draining 1,000 tons a month? I heard nothing. No response for a good 3 months. Then suddenly, in about May or April of 2013, he said, it's still going on, 1,000 tons a month for over a year. It has not stopped. And I said, does London have that much? And he said, well, they're getting some from Basel, Switzerland on provision. And I said, are they stealing more and more of the allocated gold accounts in Switzerland? He said, to be sure. The new trend, he said, back in 2013 and early 14, was that the Swiss were stealing Arab gold. Arab gold. Gulf Emirate gold. Okay, and then he just kind of in passing mentioned a few months ago, oh yeah, it still has not stopped. And I said, that's 30 months. You saying that 30,000 tons have left the London ramps heading east? And he said, yes. This is part of the new global paradigm shift that I've been talking about and that you've been writing about. This is just a detail. All right, now, lately, we've been asking more and more, are we just getting set up for a different regime on the other side of the world to impose slavery? He said, no, this is the elite that we call the white hats. And they're sick and tired of the black hats in the West and their fascist movements and their GMO foods and their chemtrails of the air and their war after war after war to deplete gold from certain central banks. They're sick of just this carbon tax. The East doesn't want any carbon tax. That's a tax on the air you breathe. Remember we were kids? We said, well, we're in really big trouble when they start taxing the air you breathe.
I remember
That's exactly what the carbon tax is.
I remember we used to say that. That's funny.
But here's the climax point, Patrick. Out of the blue, the voice shared something right before Christmas. He said, the global Western banker cabal is on the extreme defensive. This is what the murders are all about. It's not that they're trying to get rid of small people. They're getting rid of mid-level people who can incriminate the leaders of the Western banker cabal. And now the banker cabal is so much on the defensive that they're cutting deals with what I had been calling for 2 years the new sheriff in town. Now, when we referred to the 1,000 tons a month from London, I made a joke, and I said, there's a new sheriff in town, and he's from the East. And the voice said, you've got that right in ways you don't understand. And I said, yeah, well, I'd like to know who their enforcer is. And he said, the Triad. I said, you mean the Hong Kong-based mafia? And he said, yeah. They'll murder whoever's required. So I said, well, what's this banker cabal defensive all about? And he said, 90%. He said, we're making great progress. 90% of the global Western banking cabal members have cut deals. 90% of the bankers have cut deals not to be exterminated and to preserve the majority of their wealth. All they have to do is sign on to the East's plan of ending the wars, ending the GMO food, ending the fracking and contamination of the water, ending the chemtrails with the benzene and aluminum that causes, benzene's poison, by the way, and aluminum that causes Alzheimer's, by the way, and Parkinson's, by the way. They need to sign up with the East, end all the bad projects, and there's only one holdout group left. You want to take a guess who it is?
No.
The Bush family.
Really? Are they that powerful?
You can do a lot with $4 and $5 trillion in narco money.
So Jim Willie, there really is a group, a powerful, extremely wealthy group in the East that can be labeled good guys against people who could be labeled bad guys?
Let's just focus on the West, and then I'll move to the East.
Okay.
What happened in Europe between the years, say, 250 AD and 1600?
250 AD and 1600. It was just the kings, and we were just building, consolidating, and building wealth with Vatican and the whole thing, huh?
I don't think there were much in the way of kings.
Well,
there may have been
bankers.
the Pope.
Yeah.
The Pope was kind of the emperor.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And you might have had royalty in Spain, and you did not have royalty in Italy. You had city-states. So you had a lot of disintegrated European nations that were more tribe than there were country.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so where was the wealth accumulated for those 1,300 years after the Roman Empire fell?
I don't know. I guess I always thought it was the different kings of the various countries.
No, the Vatican.
Oh, the Vatican. Okay. Of course, they were right there.
The
Yeah.
Vatican basically took 95% of the wealth, and the King of Netherlands was a pauper by comparison. Okay, there's vast wealth in the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to talk about them much. I may mention them kind of as a hit and run in passing, but I don't focus on them much. They've got a lot of gold, a lot of silver, a lot of artworks, and a lot of, let's just say, strange museums of other beings. Okay, now, that's the West. So what happened in, does anybody realize what the number one nation of the world in terms of commerce and GDP was for hundreds of years, coming in to the Renaissance of the West? Coming into the year, say the 1600s. What was the number one economy of the world?
China?
China.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened in the accumulation? Let's not start at the Roman Empire.
All right.
China did not begin at the end of the Roman Empire. China's been around for, a few thousand years. So, do you think they have some Rockefellers?
Yeah.
Maybe 20 or 30. That's what I'm told. Okay, so why have they been quiet? I think they were quiet for a number of reasons, including they don't give a crap about the West. But when the British did the Opium Wars in the early 1900s, it really angered the Chinese elite. And a good question is, why did they permit 2 generations of communist rule and really permit their nation to go into a sleep mode, a quiet period? And I don't have a really good answer for that, except they were meditating. We don't have the same time schedule that the Chinese do. The Americans, I hear it over and over again. Why don't the Shanghai operators of their gold market, why don't they hop to it and double the gold price? And I say, they're not on your time schedule. Maybe they've got an 8-year schedule and you've got an 8-month schedule, and maybe you've got an 8-week perspective. Mm-hmm. So the Chinese have a raft of wealthy elite, and let's just leave it at that. I don't know full details of all their elite families, but they're fed up. They've had enough. And what are they fed up of? It's wrecking the earth. And who's responsible primarily? The Agenda 21 architects, the Bush family, the Rockefeller family, the Rothschilds. The East is fed up. So those who believe that we're just going to move to another Eastern-dominated slave state are overlooking the fact that the Easterners do not want to destroy planet Earth. We got the wrecked Gulf of Mexico. Thank you, Halliburton. We have a wrecked North Pacific Ocean. Thank you, Langley. Fukushima was not an accident. And now you've got rumors that Halliburton is dumping cesium radioactive 100, 130, I don't know the exact designation, radioactive cesium 100 miles off the California coast to cause radiation sickness and other problems like, can you say, tens of thousands of dead birds like what we're seeing on the West Coast? And they're blaming it on Fukushima. That's their smoke screen. So the East and their wealthy ancient families are sick of this. They're fed up with this, and they're also fed up with HAARP being used to promote drought in China. They don't want it anymore. So they helped to disable the HARP. And the U.S. is so vile that they unleashed HARP on California, while the fracking contaminated 1 billion gallons of wastewater into the California aquifers. Don't expect California to be the breadbasket of the world for fruits and vegetables anymore. The East is fed up with this.
Wow. And just for the record, I think it's Halliburton chemicals that are being squirted down in the earth on these fracking. So
they have a monopoly on it, Patrick, and the U.S. government, in full cooperations with both Monsanto and Halliburton, U.S. Congress made it illegal to audit or demand by court order the contents of the fracking chemicals.
Jim Willie, it is 9 minutes before the hour on 26 January 2015. Wow. So this is actually... what you're saying is actually very positive. I mean, the world is not just full of a lot of cabal, Rothschild type bankers, and they're all connected at the hip, and it's just going to get worse from here. I mean, there's actually a movement for things to get better for the environment and such.
Yes, I think the Eastern families are working to wreck the Western bankers.
And how are they going to do that?
By what you're seeing right now.
Just by all this we're talking about, the BRICS and the whole thing, and off the gold, off the dollar. That's that's the process.
Reject and
dollar.
Quarantine the dollar. If you want to bring down the West, bring down the dollar.
That's
and here's the irony.
That's
here's
it.
the irony, Patrick.
Huh.
The dumbest people in the crowd, and some of those with middle intelligence, are saying that the dollar is strong and getting stronger. No, it's not. The dollar index is rising because it's dying.
So explain why that is. So I read that in this morning, your letter, where the dollar is not getting it's getting weaker, but the index is going up. How is that? What's the dynamics there?
The dynamic is the demise of the petrodollar. That's the main dynamic at work right now.
Right.
It's not from wrecked interest rate derivatives. No, it's from wrecked Forex derivatives linking the currencies to crude oil. You had a hint of something going wrong a little over a year ago when the Brent crude oil price started to converge with the West Texas price. Think of it as the European price converged with the North American price. Well, why would that happen? That's because the whole dynamics are starting to break. I mean, it was your early warning bell that the dollar is about to die. You know, not in a month or two, in a year or two. So we had that event. Now, with the Saudis seeing their gold stolen, what they do is they give lip service to Washington and London while they have monthly conferences in Beijing to create the new marriage. What's the new marriage? Well, it's not the petrodollar. It's a link between the Chinese currency and the petro world. Think of it as the RMB oil price. We don't have a good name. I hear Gasawon, Gasayuan. There's no good name. It's the RMB and oil being linked, create a standard and think of it as a sturdy girding of the hip with a big, strong leather belt. That's how I viewed the petrodollar before, which was a stand-in for the gold standard. We broke Bretton Woods, created the petrodollar. Now it's being broken. So what am I driving at? As the petrodollar died, as the link between the U.S., think of it as Anglo-Americans and the Arabs, principally the Saudis, the Forex derivatives were all being dismantled, connecting to oil. And they're all being liquidated now, and they're all denominated in dollars now, and it's causing a tremendous demand to settle in dollars now. Anyone who thinks that the oil price is set by an equilibrium of supply and demand is a validated moron. Since when, post-Lehman in 2008, did the demand and supply dynamics dictate a 60 to 70% decline in the oil price? I'm talking early 2009. Since when? Nowhere. What dictates the oil price? The derivatives, linking the Forex currencies to the oil price. And after Lehman, there was a major Forex derivative disruption. After they righted the ship, you saw the oil price climb from $30 and $40 back to $100 and $120 before the next incident of broken derivatives linking the oil price.
Give us talk to us like we're a golden retriever so we can understand what that looks like in, say, one scenario, broken derivatives to the oil price, so we can understand how this price got back down to 45.
Well, just imagine some of the major European banks like Deutsche Bank,
right?
BNP Paribas in France, and Barclays in London, and 5 or 6 more scattered around Spain and Italy and wherever. They all, being Western cabal members, had their share of Forex derivatives that would tie the dollar to oil and tie the euro to oil and tie the British pound to oil.
There's actually derivatives that say the contracts. Contracts that are tying the black goose stuff to oil, $2.
And the major currencies.
Okay.
All right. So these derivatives are essential, critical contracts. They're not. I mean, other weird contracts are, say, a futures option on gold or a futures option on oil or whatever. These are contracts that make sure that the euro price for oil is in a tight range.
Okay.
That the dollar price of oil is in a tight range. That the British pound price of oil is in a tight range. It manages the oil price with contracts.
Oh, so they can go up or down depending on where they put their money.
Right. It has nothing to do with supply and demand.
Nothing.
The U.S. major markets have nothing to do with supply and demand and fundamentals. Do you think the S&P 500 deserves being so high given that the U.S. is locked in a depression?
Doesn't feel like it.
S&P has nothing to do with supply and demand of the stock, nor fundamentals and earnings. Nothing. These are managed markets. Bill Gross of PIMCO made a major error in 2011. He thought that when the U.S. government lost its rosy, pristine debt rating, AAA, while the U.S. government was wrestling with debt limits and pouring on more debt and struggling with the whole idea of a debt limit, and at the same time, all the foreign buyers of treasury bonds were slowly vanishing because they were rejecting the dollar. By supply, by demand, and by debt ratings, Gross mistakenly thought the U.S. Treasury bonds would lose value in a rising yield scenario, and he was dead wrong. Yeah. And so was I. I thought that we were going to see 4.5% on the long bond, and I was dead wrong. And it was a big learning lesson for me. And Rob Kirby helped me out a good bit to understand, well, gee, when you put on $8.5 trillion of interest rate derivatives and artificial demand through Morgan Stanley in the second half of 2010, you create artificial bond demand. There's nothing to do with supply and demand equilibrium for the treasury bond valuation. Nothing. So stocks, bonds, dollar, oil, nothing to do with supply and demand equilibrium. Nothing. I hope people understand when I use the word nothing.
That means nothing. Jim Willie, it's exactly 10 o'clock. This is OneRadioNetwork.com. We'll continue. Here's Health Motivated.